Um, well, so to build upon what you said and connect back in with you, Dean, I mean, what we're talking about here is innovation,
Yes.
right? You're saying I'm not just going to deal with stormwater. I'm going to look at these other waste products and turn it into energy. It's assets to liabilities, right? So there's a lot of that going on. There's renewable energy, investments, et cetera, going on here. But I think Chicago Wilderness and all of our partners can and are part of innovation. How we look at how we manage our lands, how we can help solve problems with water, how we can cool the planet, but also how we can improve quality of life and public health as we go along.
So let me tell you about the National Dairy people.
Tell me.
The dairy folks came to visit. They're looking for utility partners. The Utilities National Association of Clean Water Agencies just signed a memorandum of understanding with the dairy folks, who we've been enemies in the past. We have pollution problems with nutrients in the water. It's their fault. No, they're the point source. They need to take care of it. We decided, that's not a really good paradigm. Why don't we work together on these issues? They came to Chicago, and we said, yeah, we want to engage. We want to figure out how to solve this problem. They want to put in 2,700 digesters to recover natural gas from dairy manure, and they want to learn from us how to extract phosphorus to reapply it in a water-friendly way on their land.
That's awesome.
Talk about greenhouse gas reduction. Mm-hmm. Huge. And they're anxious to find a partner and to get this going. I think that there's people all over that are looking for those opportunities, how to solve job problems, how to solve energy problems, how to solve climate change problems. And it's not always exactly in the same language. It's not always talking about climate change directly, but it's talking about those things that sustain this planet. And I think those are things that are values that we all share. So I do think it's connecting with values that people hold and giving them the ability to relate to the conversation in a way that they can embrace it and take action.
Well, and I'm going to add, again, to the innovation part, you mentioned methane. Well, you didn't mention methane, but we know what comes out at the end of these dairy producers. And if I'm correct, I'm looking at Joyce and Aaron, my fellow climate pals of long years. Methane is like 2,000 to 3,000 times more deleterious than carbon dioxide emissions. Am I right? So here you are dealing with cleaning your water, reducing the amount of treatment you need to undertake, and a massive reduction, and that's energy efficiency and a whole range of things, and a massive reduction in methane production while you're at it, which has this exponential impact on climate mitigation.
And let's not forget the nutrients in the water.
And don't forget the nutrients, right?
We're getting those phosphorus nutrients
So
out of
these
the
are
water.
great examples of innovation. And Dean, knowing that you work on sustainability and smart grid and a whole range of things, and I'm going to ask you as well, because you're out there talking to 1 million people, what are some intersections that you can see as far as innovative practices here in the region that maybe we can connect with when we're talking about our ecological management sites, our trails, or what have you?
Well, I just think innovation, all the way from every form of renewable energy, and the things that are going on here are tremendous. The city of Naperville has put in a completely a smart grid system to be able to help with demand side management and at the same time use alternative sources of energy. So we have all kinds of neat things going on here. This city, from the standpoint of being able to allow the public to generate energy and redistribute that back onto the grid. That's going on here like I think nowhere else. So I think some of those innovations, one of the things you say in your book is don't be afraid to be Pollyanna-ish about the things that
big-ass goals, right,
and,
Jim? Got to have big-ass goals.
Well, and also about the things that we're achieving. I think part of this is people want to be attached to things that
are
successful, and we
right.
are having success. And I think the single thing that's changing the business community's view of this is they're beginning to see that they can actually make positive impacts. I think everybody understands this problem is big enough that it's going to take a whole lot of little things. It's very it's complex, and we ought to celebrate all the good things that happen. And we have so many of those things going on. And I think we just need to continue to do those things, continue to innovate, and make sure that people understand what they are. More people will get involved.
If I can also say that thing about Pollyanna, because it was, Pollyanna gets a bad name, right? But I actually had a look. I actually read the original, the first book of Pollyanna. The whole point with Pollyanna is that she's somebody who has a lot of terrible things happening in her life, but she's just glad about her personal relations with people. And I think that's not about being complacent. That's about saying, you know what, there's something really important to me. I just love the people around me. I love my friends. I love my family. I love my community. And I think that has to be somehow built into the climate message as well. So it's the excitement about innovation, but it's also recognizing that the things which are really important to us are not about climate change. They're about, and that maybe there are ways that we can respond to climate change which strengthen the really important things and the bonds between us. And that is also the kind of language which works much wider than just simply one political range. In fact, my experience of spending a lot of time with conservatives is that they hold that value very, very strongly. So that is why, again, I think that the language should be one of people working together in terms of our shared interests, not being the same. We're all different, and the business people do their thing, and actually, I think we also need radicals out there saying, no, that's not the answer, or we need faster change. We need to have everything. We're all going to be pushing in different ways. We're going to have different views. We don't want to have unity. It's not even desirable. But we can all come together as to say, actually, nonetheless, we are all in this together. So we have shared interests, because we share a whole lot of things. Yeah.
Well, and radical thinking can bring about the innovation as well, right? When people come up with crazy
No,
ideas,
totally.
and oftentimes they turn into something we wouldn't have imagined, right?
Or they put the pressure on. I mean, I've done this myself, both inside and outside businesses, because I'm in a strange situation, as you can tell from my presentation, where I've done plenty of a process for put pressure on businesses. I've also spent plenty of time actually inside businesses talking with businesses about climate change. And I think you need both. I think you need the pressure from outside, which is sometimes, we all need a little bit of a push or a shock to make things happen.
So here's a question I have for all three of you. Talking to Aaron, he was talking about, and I think a lot of our land managers are concerned that we're going to be looked to as a sponge. Okay, we'll just go back to that extreme water situation. And I think there's definitely a conflict of concern about how our large open spaces, we know it can help solve a problem, right? Hoboken, New Jersey is doing resist, delay, and store, and they're buying green belts. Milwaukee's doing it, New York's doing it, et cetera. How do we come up with innovative solutions that help you and also help us improve our ecological sites? And I'll also add into that kind of what are the business opportunities there, and how do we relate to the private property parcels of this as well? Mm-hmm. So both public and private property.
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. We have a lot, again, I think the opportunity exists because there's need, right? And so people are ready to engage. I just spent last week in DC, and they were talking about public-private partnerships and how do we address the need and get private capital in to help us address some of that need. So we spent some time thinking with our utility, how do we couple the flooding problems that we have and revitalizing areas and build resilient communities that are greener and that are more self-containing in terms of stormwater, and yet have a private developer possibly partner with us to go in and just completely, make it a great place to live, close to public transportation, make it a walkable community. I think those opportunities really exist as we identify those partners that can help put that together, and I think address their interests in developing and making money, and yet solving flooding problems and restoring some of the environment in those communities. We have great opportunity in this region to do that. We're sharing that idea with World Business Chicago today, and they said that's what we're about, is putting together these kinds of private-public partnerships. So I'm encouraged that that can happen in this area, and there's more opportunity for people working together versus just me being water, and the city does their thing, and the park district does their thing, the forest preserve. I think there's more opportunity now than ever for all of these agencies, public agencies, to come together, work together for the common good, and even bring in private partners to help us accomplish that kind of work.
So let me add the business perspective a little more detailed, mm-hmm. Dean. So if we know 70%, let's just use our oaks as an example, 70% of our oaks are on private property. Mm-hmm. And if we know that a good percentage of that land will not be put into public open space, nor will it either go through a conservation easement of some sort. We have to have a better relationship with private property owners, both homeowners and business leaders. What could we do? We've got this corporate council. We've got about 50 businesses that are here. Many of them are here today. Thank you for sponsoring this conversation. But how else can we engage larger corporate leaders or groups of corporate leaders in this conversation so that they might engage with us in actually doing work on their lands?
Yeah, well, I think that one is simple. I don't think you think about some of the corporate campuses that we have, the size of some of the corporate campuses. I'm not sure that anyone has ever really thought about how could this be developed differently or managed differently to not only be a beautiful spot for employees to come to work and people to do their thing, but to also have something that is more helpful to the environment than when they may have it constructed. I think everyone's becoming more aware of just, this is crazy, but the way we're thinking about the size of parking lots today for these campuses, people are beginning to understand that. So I think there's a whole bunch of things that can be done where even on a lot of these corporate campuses where they can be literally hundreds of acres and things can be done there. I think at the residential level, and you start talking about, those are in the hands of private people. You know, one of the things that so many of the organizations that are part of Chicago Wilderness are doing are engaging the kids and the people in the community to help them understand and think about, we have a program with the young kids who think that when we plant a bush, it comes with birds in it, okay? And to help them begin to understand that just even the little things they can do in their part of the world, what they can do just only in terms of habitat change, but how that helps just in climate, in a climate context in a lot of different ways. So I think part of that is engaging those kids, and we're doing it in schools. We're doing it with all the different groups that make up Chicago Wilderness when we get out and do service days, and they begin to look at their own yard and their own property in a very, very different way.
Well, and I would say a lot of our members here, both traditional and non-traditional educators, schools, nature centers, I was mentioning some of the programs before, like Mighty Acorns, Conservation at Home, Conservation at Work, Tree Keepers, the new Conservation in Your Community program with Animalia and Faith in Place, and so many of these other different...
The school gardening
and the school
programs.
gardens, right? So there's programs kind of at every different age, but what we've been talking about a lot for Chicago Wilderness, for instance, we need to build a conservation ethic in the region, but we also need to build capacity for our members. They're all doing really good work. We need to do more of it. And I do think one of the critical issues is how we connect with the business community. So what I'm hearing you say is it's not a hard message to sell. I think it's about the access to deliver the message. And so maybe you can help us think about that a little bit.
And I think, you've got to start on it. We have a corporate council. We're beginning within Chicago Wilderness to say this is not just Audubon, open lands, the environmental groups, the conservation groups. This is, everybody can play here. And I think the corporate council, people are beginning to look at this as what can I do? I'm a part of this. What are the things that I can do? Again, I go back to the corporate campus thing. I'm not sure anyone's ever asked and said, wouldn't it be a whole lot less costly, okay, if we had some oaks in this corner of your property, okay? We were
don't
talking...
have to mow anymore, you don't have to
water.
water.
This is lower cost, okay?
Right.
And all kinds of good things are happening.
Right.
And again, is that a big deal? Any one of those singly? No. But are they all cumulatively adding up to something? I think they can.
Well, if we took a Baxter and an Abbott alone, we might get one of our 1,000-acre parcels, don't you think, Jim? Right, so there's a lot of opportunities like that, and I think there's great opportunity to have those conversations, save money, make some improvements, et cetera.
One other thing, if you look at what golf courses have finally begun to do, is golf courses have begun to figure out that the way they can make the economics of the golf course better is to have less grass that they have to water, less chemicals they have to put down, and they make it more natural and more beautiful and more habitat around, and everyone wins because it's a better place to play golf and it's a heck of a lot cheaper to run the golf course.
Cool. I've got a couple questions I'd like to take from our illustrious audience, if I may. this is a good one. How do we turn negative statistics into information that drives change? That's a good one. I mean, the bottom line is, I think we are ridiculously unprepared with good data that means something to our region. How do we take negative statistics, so I guess that's going to be a lot of our climate challenges,
Bad stuff.
and
turn-
do something with that to drive change?
To me, that's an easy one. You start talking about the solution. Yeah, how do I change that number?
I'll tell you something really interesting, which is a lot of communications is about how something isn't happening. And you know how, like I said, that people look for social cues, so they look like something which says, oh, this is what people are doing. If you run communications that say, well, for example, I was working with a leading cycling charity in Britain, and they were running this whole campaign saying, isn't it terrible? 80% of people are now driving their kids to school. And I said, all you're doing is you're telling people that the normal thing for caring parents to do is to take their kids to school. It's like you're just promoting it. And that's like the negative statistic. The negative statistic is going out there and is saying that the bad thing is the norm. And I think it's really, really important to just focus on that. I will say, by the way, that statistics don't necessarily work. A third of people are functionally innumerate anyway. They don't even read. I mean, I'm not putting them down. I mean, they're not, you know, if you say so many percent of this or so many percent of that, you've already lost a bunch of people. But also what happens is that people take the figure, that's that part of the brain that deals with figures, and they turn it into the story. So much, much better to show pictures and images of people doing the positive thing you want to do.
So there's a set of questions here about the agricultural community and how we engage them, and you had a great example of the dairy farming world. I know that Open Lands and others have talked a lot about farmland preservation being, that's our next frontier of development, right? What kind of things have you been doing with the farming community? You spoke a little bit about that, but what have you been hearing from or engaging in with regards to the farming community?
I'm going to pass to these guys. That's one community I've not worked with.
Well,
Yeah.
all right.
Well, I'll say, you know, I've spent a lot of time recently with the farm community. Agriculture is huge in Illinois. It's our #1 industry. And we had a series of dialogues that the Johnson Foundation sponsored to get utility managers together with actual producers and to talk about the nutrient issue and to decide how do we work together to solve this issue. And you know, I think to deal with any sector of the community, you have to understand their perspective and where they're coming from, because again, their perspective is real and there's a lot you can learn. And then take that perspective and figure out how we can work together to accomplish a task. What I discovered is these are conservationists. They have soil science, believe it or not, down to a science, thus the name, probably, soil science. They have automatic machines that put down just the right amount of fertilizer. They are here to produce food, to feed a planet that needs food, and they produce low-cost food, they produce clothes, they produce food, fuel. And if they understand an issue, they're willing to work hard toward resolving that issue. But it's not enough to understand, and they take great pride in that, being conservationists. They have fears too. They have fears of regulation. They have fears that they're going to be put out of business and loss. And I think all of those things, George, you covered in your book. You know, you run into people that have strong values and yet also see threats to their values, possibly by the conversation of climate change.
I think the vital thing, and it comes out again and again and again, is the starting of a conversation has to be validating and respecting people for who they are and what they stand for before you can even enter into the conversation. So, of course, for a farming community, it's about saying, you know, it's about utterly respecting the hard work that they put in growing the food that we eat, and I think that goes
exactly right.
Goes for anyone. Yeah.
I mean, what we started the conversation with is we like water and we like food.
I actually said
and
in the
trees
book,
and birds too.
Yeah.
Let's just add that.
I said incidentally, I don't know if anybody saw during the Super Bowl a few years ago the extraordinary Dodge advert that they took from the speech, "God Made a Farmer." Very, very powerful. Mm-hmm. and it went for like 2 minutes through Super Bowl, and you have to be Dodge in order to be able to afford 2 minutes during Super Bowl. And it was like I show it to my colleagues in the environment movement. I said, we have never done anything which speaks as strongly as this to people's sense of pride and identity. We just knock people the whole time.
And then they're ready to talk.
Absolutely.
And
And
then
then
they're
you can
ready
have
to
a
listen.
conversation, which is going to be a conversation based on difference
That's
too.
correct.
Then people prepared to say, okay, and now we've got differences, but at least we're starting to come from the right place.